I secretly warned my dad's girlfriend's daughter about him, and it destroyed their relationship. I am 44 years old, the youngest of five, and I've spent the better part of my adult life in therapy trying to unlearn the lessons my father taught me. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the man my father is. He isn't just a difficult person. He's a predator. Growing up, our house wasn't a home. It was a cage. I remember being 5 or 6 years old, hiding in the crawl space under the stairs because I could hear the specific rhythm of his footsteps, the heavy, deliberate thud that meant he had been drinking and someone, usually my mother, was going to pay for it. I witnessed violence that no child should ever see. I saw the bruises, the broken spirits, and the way he used fear to maintain a vacuum of power. As I got older, I realized the violence was only one tool in his belt. The other was financial exploitation. My father doesn't love women. He audits them. He looks at a woman and sees a bank account with a heartbeat. He has been married and divorced 4 times. Each time, the pattern was identical. Find a woman in a vulnerable state, isolate her, drain her assets, and move on when the well runs dry. About 20 years ago, he married his fourth wife. She had just lost both of her parents and inherited a significant sum of money. Almost immediately, he convinced her to move to a different state, thousands of miles away from us and anyone who actually cared about her. He isolated her completely. By the time they divorced, she was broken-hearted, and he was already looking for the next mark. That next mark turned out to be Jane. He's been with Jane for about 10 years now. When I first met her, my stomach turned. She's kind, soft-spoken, and incredibly naive. Exactly the kind of person my father targets. A few years into their relationship, Jane's parents passed away in quick succession. Like a moth to a flame, my father settled in. Jane received a very large inheritance, but her family isn't stupid. They saw the writing on the wall. They set up her inheritance so she receives it in increments, about $12,000 every 3 months, specifically so no one could take it all at once. Fast forward to recently. My father's health started failing. There was a major scare where we thought he wouldn't make it, though he's since stabilized. Around the same time, Jane was diagnosed with dementia. My siblings, who've spent their lives stuffing their emotions into a tiny box and pretending our childhood was just a bit rough, decided that the best course of action was to move my father back up to our home state so they could provide care for him. Because they are fixers who can't handle the reality of who he is, they just assumed Jane would come along as a package deal. I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the only one who went to intensive therapy, the only one who maintains rock-solid boundaries, and the only one who will look him in the eye and call him a liar to his face. My siblings hate this. They call me difficult or judgmental because I refuse to participate in the collective amnesia they use to survive. I reconnected with him recently, strictly to smooth the waters for his arrival. I have no intention of changing his diapers or driving him to appointments. I'll visit for 15 minutes, keep it cordial, and leave. I know my limits. But then, a group text happened that changed everything. My dad, feeling emboldened by the attention, sent a message to all of us asking if we thought he should finally marry Jane. My siblings were non-committal, mostly because they didn't want to deal with the paperwork. But then my sister dropped a comment that made my blood run cold. She wrote, "Well, if you marry her, then Jane's daughter won't have any say about the move or her medical decisions." I stared at the screen. I asked for clarification, and it came out that Jane's daughter was apparently being difficult and wasn't happy about her mother, a woman with declining cognitive function, being moved across state lines away from her medical team and her family. My father and my siblings were looking for a way to circumvent the daughter's wishes. They were talking about a woman with dementia, like she was a piece of luggage they could just claim at the carousel. It was disrespectful, it was deceitful, and it was classic Dad. I knew exactly why he wanted that marriage license. It gave him legal control over those $12,000 quarterly checks. I didn't say any of that in the group chat. I've learned that arguing with my siblings is like shouting into a vacuum. Instead, I went silent. I went to work. It wasn't hard to find Jane's daughter on social media. I spent an afternoon cross-referencing names and locations until I found her. I sent her a message, briefly explaining who I was and asking if we could talk. She responded almost immediately. When we finally got on the phone, the tone was guarded at first. She knew who my father was, but she only knew the version he presented, the devoted partner helping her mother through a hard time. "I need to tell you some things," I said. "And I need you to listen before you say anything." I didn't hold back. I told her about the violence in our childhood. I told her about the 4 marriages. I told her about the wife from 20 years ago who was drained of every cent she had. I explained the pattern. I explained that my father doesn't move for love. He moves for leverage. Then, I went for the clincher. I had spent the morning pulling public records. I emailed her PDF copies of his arrest records and court documents from over the years, documented proof of his character that he had spent a decade hiding from Jane. He's asking my siblings if he should marry her, I told her. He wants to take away your legal right to protect your mother. He wants that inheritance. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, her voice broke. She started telling me what had been happening on her end. She told me that despite the $12,000 Jane gets every 3 months, there was no money in Jane's savings account.
None.
My father had been investing it for her. When the daughter checked the investment accounts, they were nearly empty. They had been living a lifestyle Jane's inheritance was supposed to be securing for her future care, but the money was just gone. I knew something was wrong, she whispered. I felt in my gut, but I thought I was being paranoid because he seemed so helpful. I told her I would be her insider. Anything my siblings discussed, any plans they made to move Jane or change her legal status, I would report back to her. I became a double agent in my own family. Since those conversations, things have shifted rapidly. Jane's daughter didn't confront my father with my name, but she suddenly became very firm about her mother's medical and financial care. She demanded an accounting of the funds. She blocked the move. The result? My father has backed off entirely. Now that he realizes he can't get his hands on the bulk of the money and that the daughter is watching him like a hawk, his devotion to Jane has evaporated. The current plan has completely changed. Jane is moving to a different state to live with her daughter, where she will get the professional memory care she needs. My father is moving up here to be near my siblings. They are, for all intents and purposes, breaking up. My father is miserable. He's complaining to my siblings about how unreasonable Jane's daughter is being. My siblings are stressed because now they have to handle him 100% of the time without Jane's money to pad the transition. They have no idea I'm the reason the plan fell apart. They think it was just bad luck or Jane's daughter being a bitch. I watch the group texts fly by. I see my father playing the victim, and I see my siblings coddling him. Part of me feels a twinge of guilt for the chaos I've caused in their lives, but then I think about Jane. I think about her sitting in a house she paid for, with a man who was waiting for her brain to fail so he could sign her checks. I think about the 19-year-old version of me, who wished someone would have stepped in and warned my mother. I couldn't save my mom. I couldn't save the wives that came after. But I saved Jane. My siblings keep dropping hints that I should step up, more now that Dad is coming back alone. They say I'm being cold. They don't realize that I've already done more for this family's integrity than any of them have in 40 years. So, am I the a-hole for blowing up my father's relationship and ruining his retirement plans by telling his girlfriend's daughter the truth? Or was I just doing what should have been done decades ago? Update. It has been a few weeks since everything shifted, and the strangest part is how quiet things feel now. Not peaceful exactly, but settled in a way I don't remember ever experiencing when my father was at the center of things. Growing up, calm never lasted long. Calm meant waiting. Calm meant something was building. Now the silence feels different, like something heavy finally moved out of the room, even though the consequences are still unfolding around all of us. My siblings still don't know what I did. At this point, I'm fairly certain they suspect something happened behind the scenes, but none of them have connected it to me. They keep circling around the situation like people trying to solve a puzzle without admitting the picture is obvious. The official story in the family is that Jane's daughter suddenly became controlling and overprotective, that she panicked after her mother's diagnosis and started interfering. That explanation allows everyone to stay comfortable because it keeps my father in the role they prefer, unlucky victim of difficult women. Watching them cling to that narrative has been surreal. The same patterns I grew up with are still operating, just quieter and dressed up in adult language. When we were kids, denial looked like pretending bruises were accidents. Now denial looks like calling financial exploitation, miscommunication, and manipulation stress. Jane moved sooner than expected. Her daughter arranged everything quickly once she realized how unstable the situation actually was. From what I understand, medical evaluations were scheduled almost immediately and financial oversight was transferred to professionals. The speed of it all told me how serious the daughter believed things had become. People don't reorganize a parent's entire life in a matter of weeks unless fear is driving the decisions. I stayed in contact with her throughout the process, though less frequently than at first. In the beginning, there were long conversations filled with shock and anger as she pieced together 10 years of her mother's relationship through a completely new lens. Over time, those conversations became more practical. She was focused on logistics, doctors, legal paperwork, and figuring out how much damage had already been done financially. There wasn't dramatic confrontation or revenge. Mostly exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing you almost lost control of a situation without even knowing it was slipping away. One conversation stuck with me more than the others. She told me she kept replaying past visits in her mind, remembering moments that felt slightly off but never alarming enough to question. Comments about investments she didn't understand. Expenses that didn't match her mother's lifestyle. Subtle distancing from family gatherings that had seemed harmless at the time. Hearing that made something inside me ache because it mirrored my own childhood memories, recognizing warning signs years too late. The financial picture turned out to be worse than either of us expected. There wasn't a single dramatic theft or obvious transfer that could easily be challenged. Instead, money had disappeared slowly through shared expenses, questionable investment choices, and withdrawals justified as joint decisions. Legally murky enough to avoid immediate consequences, but ethically unmistakable. The inheritance that was meant to secure Jane's long-term care had been steadily drained while my father positioned himself as her caretaker. Once oversight tightened, his interest in maintaining the relationship faded almost overnight. That part didn't surprise me, but seeing it happen so openly still felt jarring. For years, he portrayed himself as devoted, patient, self-sacrificing. Within days of financial accountability entering the picture, he began complaining that the relationship had become stressful and unfair to him. According to my siblings, he described himself as pushed out after giving everything. That phrase kept echoing in my head because it perfectly summarized him. He genuinely believes his own version of events. In his mind, support equals entitlement. Helping someone becomes justification for ownership. The breakup itself wasn't explosive. No dramatic fight, no public accusations. Just distance. Fewer calls. Plans quietly canceled. Eventually confirmation that Jane would remain with her daughter permanently while my father prepared to relocate near us alone. 10 years ended with barely a ripple, which somehow made it sadder. My siblings shifted immediately into caretaking mode once it became clear he was coming back without her. Suddenly, there were group messages about doctor referrals, housing arrangements, transportation schedules. The practical reality of caring for him landed squarely in their laps, and I could feel resentment beginning to simmer beneath their cooperation. They won't say it outright, but Jane's presence had softened the burden they were about to inherit. Without her, everything became heavier. They've started pressuring me more directly now. Not aggressively, but persistently. Comments about family responsibility, about how everyone needs to contribute, about forgiveness and moving forward. The subtext is clear. They want me to participate emotionally in a way I no longer can. I've held my boundaries. I told them I would visit occasionally, help coordinate information if necessary, but I will not become a caregiver. That decision hasn't changed, and each conversation reinforces why it needed to exist in the first place. Every time they talk about him, they focus on his age, his health, his loneliness. None of them mention history. The past remains something we orbit, but never acknowledge directly. Seeing him again after all this has been strange. He looks smaller than I remember. Age and illness have taken away some of the physical intimidation that defined my childhood. For a brief moment during our first visit, I almost felt sympathy strong enough to blur my boundaries. Then he started talking. Within minutes, he was criticizing Jane's daughter, describing her as manipulative and ungrateful. He framed the entire situation as betrayal, insisting he had only ever tried to help. Listening to him rewrite reality in real time snapped something back into place for me. The same refusal to accept accountability, the same narrative control, just delivered in a weaker voice. He asked if I thought he had been treated unfairly. I didn't argue. I didn't expose anything. I simply said that sometimes people make decisions to protect the ones they love. He didn't like that answer. The conversation moved on, but I could tell he sensed distance he couldn't quite explain. The guilt I expected to feel hasn't arrived the way I thought it would. There are moments when I wonder whether I interfered too much, whether it was truly my place. Those thoughts usually surface late at night when everything is quiet and second-guessing feels louder. But then I remember specific memories from childhood. My mother crying in rooms she thought we couldn't hear, the constant tension, the financial chaos after each marriage ended, and the doubt fades. What surprises me most is how protective I feel toward Jane despite never being close to her. Maybe it's because she represents every woman who came before her, every situation where no one stepped in early enough. This time someone had information and chose to share it before irreversible damage happened. That difference matters more to me than family harmony ever could. The dynamic among my siblings has subtly changed as well. Stress exposes cracks people spend years hiding. Small disagreements about logistics turn into arguments that clearly carry older resentment underneath. They are beginning to experience the reality I accepted long ago, that loving someone does not automatically make them safe to center your life around. I don't think they will ever fully confront who our father is. That realization used to frustrate me. Now it mostly makes me sad. Therapy taught me something I resisted for years. People survive trauma in different ways, and denial can be as much a coping mechanism as confrontation. They built lives around minimizing the past because acknowledging it would force them to reevaluate decades of choices. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jane's daughter has settled into something calmer. We check in occasionally, mostly brief updates. Her mother is adjusting to new routines, and while dementia brings its own heartbreak, she is now surrounded by people focused entirely on her well-being. Hearing that has given me a sense of closure I didn't expect. Not triumph, not vindication, just relief. Recently, she told me her mother seems less anxious since the move. That detail stayed with me longer than anything else. Anxiety had always surrounded my father like background noise. I didn't realize how much I associated him with tension until hearing that someone felt calmer once distance was created. My father, on the other hand, appears restless. Without a partner to orbit around, he spends a lot of time recounting old stories, revising history in ways that paint him as misunderstood rather than harmful. My siblings listen politely. I observe quietly. The difference now is that I no longer feel responsible for correcting him or managing his perception of me. Emotional distance has become natural instead of forced. There was one moment recently that clarified everything. During a family dinner, conversation drifted toward relationships and aging. Someone joked that Dad just had bad luck with women. Everyone laughed lightly. Years ago, I would have argued, laid out facts, tried to force acknowledgement. Instead, I sat there and realized I didn't need validation anymore. The truth existed whether anyone agreed with it or not. That realization felt like closing a door I'd been holding open my entire life. I don't know if my siblings will ever learn what I did. Part of me thinks the truth will eventually surface because secrets in families rarely stay buried forever. Another part of me doesn't care if it does. The outcome already happened. Jane is safe. Her daughter has control over her care. The cycle stopped, at least this once. Sometimes I wonder how different my childhood might have been if someone had intervened earlier for my mother. That thought used to fill me with anger. Now it mostly strengthens my certainty that silence protects the wrong people. The family dynamic is undeniably altered. There's tension under conversations, an unspoken awareness that something shifted even if no one names it. Yet despite the discomfort, I feel lighter than I have in decades. I'm no longer carrying the weight of watching history repeat itself while pretending not to see it. So now I sit in my living room, phone quiet beside me, aware that my actions reshaped several lives at once. Maybe my siblings would call it betrayal if they knew. Maybe my father would see it as sabotage. From where I stand, it feels like interruption, stepping into a pattern that had run unchecked for 40 years and refusing to let it continue one more time. Whether that makes me the villain in my family story is something I've stopped trying to control. For the first time, the outcome matters more to me than the label attached to it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.